Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, Dr. John DeLynn. It is February 7th, 2022, and we are super excited for today's episode. I am joined by my partner in goodness and truth, Carah Burrell. Hey, Carah.
Hi, John. Hey, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Hope you guys are excited.
Absolutely. And if that weren't enough, we're also really excited to have with us Gerardo. Hey, Gerardo.
Yay.
You're muted, Gerardo.
I'm sorry. Hey, John. Hey, Carah.
It's good to have you.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one.
I love it. In the past episode with Simon, that look up, Carah, that we called this the first presidency. This is the Mormon Stories first president. Although I don't want to be president. So
yeah, Carah's the president.
Oh, perfect.
Can I be
I have so many ideas.
Can I be your counselor?
Yeah.
All right. Gerardo and I will be your counselor. Anyway,
we've already decorated too.
I know there's a candle going.
It's already more feminine.
All sorts of good things. So. All right. So this is a special episode. Yesterday, February 6th, my text app started blowing up from friends of mine in Alpine, Utah. There was a tri-stake youth fireside that was hosted by none other than Brad Wilcox, who is a BYU professor. He's well known, and I guess his official title is second counselor in the Young Men General Presidency for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So it's fair to say Brad is one of the top three leaders in the entire Mormon Church over youth. That's not exaggerating. And so, like, right under general authorities would be the auxiliary.
For sure.
Correct? Yeah. So Brad is a really big deal. He's pretty much about as close to a general authority as you can come. And he gave a fireside talk that was about 50 minutes long, and it was to the youth. And what I'm going to share now is the Mormon Stories blog post, because we have to explain kind of our format for today. So if you go to, first of all, one of the things that the LDS Church does is they'll sue you if you release an entire 50-minute episode. And I guess I should start by saying this episode that was released was, I think, explosive. Do you think explosive is exaggerating, Carah?
I was just telling the chat that, like, I've had to stop swearing all morning.
It was mind-blowing, John.
Yeah, it's
so
have
Carah says profanity inducing, Gerardo says mind-blowing, I say explosive. Just to kind of give you guys a sense for some of the quotes that this is just a preview. Brad says things like,
you want to walk away from the church? Walk away from anything that lets anything in your life count or matter beyond this life. All right, we're going to go.
So, yeah.
We're getting worse.
So
maybe instead of asking, why did the blacks have to wait till 1978? Maybe what we should be asking is, why did the whites and other races have to wait till 1829? It gets worse.
Okay. I'll do one. Christianity has a problem, a huge problem.
Don't spoil it, John, too much.
What's that?
Don't spoil it too much.
Okay, yeah.
We're just want you to buckle in, practice self-care.
Some of the most egregious statements I've ever seen anywhere he mentions. So we are going to be covering it today, and I just want to kind of explain the format. So we do have a copy of the full talk, and normally we would just prefer to share that. The problem is the church will sue us if we just share the full talk. So for those of you who want to go watch the full talk, right now, you can go to mormonstories.org. We have a embedded link to the full talk that is shared by the church and by it says Alpine Tri-Stake Regional Fireside Webinar. That is shared now, so you can go watch it. But we know that that's going to be taken down within probably a few hours, because this is so explosive. So expect that link to disappear. So what we did is we went ahead and downloaded the full video and re-uploaded it, but we didn't upload it completely because that's how the church sues you. So they'll send Kurt McConkie after you and file a copyright violation on YouTube and have the entire video taken down.
And get like a strike against our account probably too.
And it could jeopardize our account. So on the Understanding Mormonism channel, because we don't want this to affect Mormon Stories, we've broken the talk out into 9 different sections, and we've created a playlist. So if you want, if the church's own video gets taken down, then you can go to the playlist on Understanding Mormonism and watch it uninterrupted in 9 separate parts. But that's why we broke it up into 9 separate parts.
And I really encourage you to go listen to the whole thing. We're going to play a lot of clips, but it's up to you to go listen to it and make your own opinions.
Yeah. And then on the Mormon Stories podcast channel, we have to provide commentary, or literally they'll shut the video down. And
I thought they were going to say we have to provide commentary, or we will die.
That's also true.
Or they will take the video down.
Yeah, but this is the channel where we're actually going to do what's called a response video, where we are going to play excerpts from the video and make commentary. And that's what's going to allow us on the Mormon Stories podcast channel to release pretty much what's going to amount to the whole video. So hold on to your hats. This is going to be really explosive. Gerardo, is there anything you want to say kind of before we jump in? And you're muted again.
Yeah, sorry. I'll keep watching that. No. I think it was a great explanation. I mean, I know a few people may wonder, why you're not providing the whole context? Well, that's the main reason. We have to provide I think it's at least 50% commentary rights for it not to violate copyright laws. And we also want to jump right in and go and comment on everything that Wilcox said. So it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, because we think this is breaking news. And by the way, we're also releasing our video, the unedited video version that you can download on mormonstories.org to make your own. It's not audio corrected. Our versions are audio corrected. But if you want to just download the raw video and then chop it up, audio corrected, and make your own videos, we don't want to hold you hostage to our content. So
yeah, in other words, we want as many people who are on TikTok to be able to take the videos and make your own commentary on them and spread them around the platform as much as possible. So we want to make that easy and accessible.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I'm going to say one last thing. I want to kind of make it really clear. And I tried, Carah and Gerardo and I talked about this beforehand. The purpose of this episode is not to bash Brad Wilcox. It's not to shame him. For me, it's not even to call him out. I am going to spend hopefully zero amount of my commentary criticizing Brad Wilcox. What we like to say on Mormon Stories podcast, we've got this from other people, is it's systems, not people. And so we don't like shaming or calling out individuals. But Brad Wilcox is a high-level leader of the Mormon Church, and I guarantee you that his commentary represents Orthodox Mormon Church leadership, positions on issues like, is this the one true church, the Godhead, the priesthood, on the Holy Ghost, on epistemology, on living prophets, all those
other
things.
Christian churches.
What's that?
Other Christian churches?
Other Christian churches as well.
He talks a lot about that, which, sorry to interrupt, but I think that was part of the things that shocked me the most. I think the church had stopped for a while talking about and bashing other churches, especially Christian churches. But the fact that just he went after them, that was just, it's kind of like relieving McConkie, Joseph Fielding Smith Mormonism.
Right.
Yeah, he goes after other religions in really hideous ways. And
yeah, I think under the context of kind of in a fear-mongering way of the talking to the youth. Just remember that as you're watching this, he's talking to the youth at a fireside in a way that you'll see a lot of people leaving, and where else are they going to go? Kind of under that kind of guise. So
yeah. And then what we'll do is we'll try and incorporate your comments as it makes sense. But what we may do is we'll have Carah and Gerardo star the comments that are most interesting or applicable, and maybe we'll do a Q&A or highlight the commentary at the end,
right?
So that we don't make the early part of our commentary too long.
Yeah.
So Gerardo and Carah liberally use the star feature in the comment section. You know what that is, Gerardo?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And the first clip that we're going to share, we're not starting from the very, very beginning. First of all, I thought it was really lovely that a young woman conducts this meeting.
Right.
And honestly, I've never seen a young woman conduct a major Mormon church meeting before. Is that, and of course, I haven't been attending in the past few years. Have either of you ever heard of a woman, let alone a young woman, conducting a meeting where the stake presidency members are on the stand? Is that new
Thumbs
or
up
not?
from us.
What?
Yeah.
I think it's pretty
Thumbs
new.
up in the right direction.
What's that, Gerardo?
It's new and progressive. I've never seen that before.
And we left that out, not to not give the church credit for that, but just to protect the privacy of the young woman involved.
Yeah.
So, but that was really cool. There's also a musical number that he references, a piano number of a church hymn that I think the youth arranged himself and then played. I don't remember his name.
Yes.
You'll hear him mention it later on. But it's basically just the woman, the young woman conducts. There's a musical number played, and then Brad Wilcox is the only speaker. So that's
the context.
That's what you're missing before we start. All right.
Oh, and the beginning that we're putting at the end.
Yeah. So there is a section where he talks about what's it called, Gerardo? What's the program?
FSY.
FSY, which stands for
Youth Only.
Oh, for youth only.
For Strength of Youth.
Wait. Yeah, for Strength of Youth. Yeah.
Which is, I guess the church is the church is sunsetting the EFY program and is replacing it with FSY. Is that right, Gerardo? Is